So I'm here today with the incredibly talented Mr. Dave Boyle. How are you, mate?
I'm good, John, man. How are you?
Very, very well, thank you, mate. All the better for the intensely strong coffee. It's just like helping me keep my eyes open, function, and form sentences. It's good stuff.
The elixir of life.
Oh, mate, life's blood. So, Dave, you are a stuntman. You with the Irish Stunt Guild?
Yes, Stunt Register Ireland, yeah.
Register Island, yeah, thought you were, dude. And we met originally filming the third season of Penny Dreadful, and then again more recently on season 3 of Into the Badlands, where, if I remember rightly, there was also a side plot to Into the Badlands where yourself and Kieran O'Grady actually took off from the front lines of Badlands on a motorbike together, very romantically, for a better life, selling rich tea biscuits, I believe it was, or something along those lines. What happened?
That is exactly. We filmed a good few episodes, but they didn't want to run the show. They didn't buy it, so unfortunately, that's been it.
I think we need to make that. I think that's a winner. I think we need to progress with that at some point in time in the future. I mean, maybe the wheel's not ready for it right now. You just sit on it for a little bit and try again in a few years.
Yeah, it's way ahead of its time. That's the problem.
That's the thing. It is. It's visionary.
Yeah.
So, Dave, what other shows have you and big sort of projects that people might know have you been on? I'm going to chuck one in there. I know you've worked extensively on Vikings, which I still haven't gotten round. I've seen bits of, and I've loved it. And now we're on lockdown. Well, I am for another 2 weeks. Maybe in the next 2 weeks, I'll binge watch Vikings before we get back to it. But please tell us a little bit more about Vikings and about some of the other projects that you've been involved with.
Vikings was my first job as a stunt performer, and it's really where I learned the craft. I spent most of my time there, and I think I worked on that job for maybe 4 or 5 years on and off. A couple of days here, a couple of days there, a week here. And it was great. It was an experience, absolutely an experience, sometimes a bit surreal, and when there was 500 people on this giant field and you're playing, you died for the 700th time, and there's a cavalry, 10, 15, 20 horses charging towards you, and you can feel the ground rumbling. It was definitely an eye-opener in that sense. But then after Vikings, I managed to branch out and work on a couple of the jobs. We met on Penny Dreadful. That was brilliant.
Yeah, it was.
Certainly, my last couple of jobs were I did an episode of Stranger Things, and before that was Black Widow. That was supposed to release 1st of May, but they've been pushed back to 1st of November.
Black Widow, the Marvel one, or am I?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's another tasty credit. Stranger Things is one of my favourite things on TV. I absolutely love it, mate. Love it.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Oh, in regards to the battles in Vikings, we had a few like that on Into the Badlands as well. I remember you taking a particularly epic horse fall from the horseback on that particular battle. So yeah, I imagine you felt that one a little bit.
I remember that one as well, John. Yeah, yeah, I haven't forgotten.
I don't imagine you would. It looked like absolutely badass. I imagine it probably hurt as much as it looked like it did. Pads or not, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. It's a great shot. I managed the shot ended up in the final cut, which is great. To be able to manage to not only do the gag, but also manage to get it right where it was supposed to be caught on camera. Because there's nothing worse than breaking yourself up and the camera guy going, "Nah, missed it." No.
Can we go again?
Yeah,
I know that one. No, like the battle scenes are really, really, they are extremely physical, and they are extremely challenging, and they are damn dangerous as well, especially when you're doing like the clashes. And we did a massive clash in the Badlands, and that was one of those, can we go again episode. I kid you. Were you in that? I don't know if you were in that shot. Everyone was in that shot where we were going again and again and again. Right. At the beginning of that day, doing the cavalry scenes, I during one of the charges, and I was on foot running down behind you guys on the horses, I just slipped on a bit of gravel because we're filming in the quarry, right? and I just overextended, and I felt my hamstring like tweak, and I thought, oh, yeah, right. Now, I didn't think anything too much of it at the time. I thought, okay, get away with that. And then take after take after take. Then I was doing another scene, which basically involved a massive hill sprint in full kit, right? Where I sprinted up and it was like a sand dune as well. It wasn't like solid ground. It was like that. And it's like soft ground. And there was me, all the doctors who was on that one. And I can't remember. Ray was on it, Ray Nick. He was one of the guys at the top. And Mark Epstein and a few other guys. Anyways, so then after doing God knows how many takes of that long cavalry sprint down into the valley behind you lot and doing my hamstring on about the fourth one, then I had to do 11 or 12 takes of these hill sprints in full kit up this soft tangent, which it was actually not too bad that because the angle sort of took away from it. But then we finished the day with the clash of the two armies coming together, which eventually the shot looked absolutely badass. You've seen it, yeah?
Yeah.
Great. But how many fucking times did we do that shot? Oh, my God. Now, I'll be honest, by this point in time, my hamstring is on fire. Now, what I'd actually done is I'd torn it. It was not a tear as in the full-blown, like, hospitalised tear. It's what's called a grade 2 tear, where the tear's like in the body of the muscle. Because when I got back to the hotel afterwards, I have my mobile keep me going kit, which is an American softball, right? It's a Mickey Mouse one from Disneyland. It's pretty cool, right?
Nice.
Like just a fuck ton of cocodamol and deep heat, right? And between that and like hot and cold baths and just stretching, that's poor man's massage with the tennis ball, you know, lying on the ground, sticking your shoulder, trigger points, right? It's the deep heat and it's the heat and cold stuff, and then just the painkillers and the willpower. But that's how you keep going. But mate, I was towards the end. It's one of the only times ever, like, because I don't mind the physicality at all. I love it. But it was one of the only times ever I was just in agony with my leg, and I'm thinking, please, just say we got it. And then some tit in the back line apparently smiling on camera, because there was one take and I thought that was perfect. That was so good. I'm like, that had to be the one, right? No, it's in the background smile. I mean, they actually took the guy off because he was smiling on he takes. And I'm like, I'm like, just let me at him. I'll make sure he ain't smiling on the next one. You can smile at that thing.
The thing that really got me about those battle days and those charges and all those kinds of crazy things was sometimes I'd stand there and look around and go, people used to do this for real.
Yeah.
Like this is a bamboo sword or, you know, plastic axe or whatever, you know, but like people for real.
Yeah.
Mayhem.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting, you know. You see like 50, 100 people like smashing each other and, you know, cutting and stabbing and all this kind of stuff, and then you're kind of going, this is all make believe and it's a bit of crack and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, it makes you kind of wonder what it was really like for people when these real kind of battles actually happened.
Very much same thought process. I mean, it really, really does sort of strike home with you, you know. I mean, I'm not being funny, mate. It's dangerous enough with the polypropylene stuff. There's a you know, again, you know, for those of you that don't work as stunt people, there's a way of doing it safely. You know, you can't just be waving your polypropylene sword or axe, because that is hard plastic with an edge. It will still cut you to fuck. It really will. Also, points going into people's eyes. That happened on one take on Badlands, I remember, on one of those clashes. And I don't even want to think about that. I've had that happen to myself twice in martial arts. Once with an elbow strike, where the point of the elbow went directly into my eyeball. And once, even more beautifully, I ran on in a semi-contact tournament, a roundhouse kick, and I ran on, and the guy's big toe went into my eye socket. Oh, that sucked so badly. Then what happens is, by the way, guys, then you get like bleeding behind you can do serious permanent damage to your eye. On both occasions, I was lucky. But what you get bleeding behind the eyeball, right? And then over the next few weeks, it kind of just, the swelling goes down, it dissipates. But you'll be sat there, and then all of a sudden, blood will just start coming out your nose, or it'll be running down the back of your throat, and like, great. So I was like that for a couple of weeks, and you can't blow your nose for about a month because of the pressure in your head. So it's just a hideous thing, hideous thing. So I'm just glad that wasn't a sharp point in my eye, because I can't think that I'd be a fan of that, really. So there's some, yeah. Also Vikings, right? I don't know. I'm nothing to do with the show, so I'll speak freely. You might have to be very, like, what's the word? Diplomatic. But
Yeah.
a lot of the stunt lads and ladies were saying that the extras that they employed for Vikings were generally batshit crazy, and were quite often maybe not as professional as your average stuntman, who will usually wait till the end of the day before they go and start drinking heavily or indulging in substances. I mean, that's what a true professional does. I mean, you pie after the work is done. The general consensus was that a lot of the guys on the Vikings, the extras and what have you, were starting rather early with that it's 5 o'clock somewhere mentality, and then, you know, just going nuts with their. Any comment on that, Dave?
The extras on Vikings were
Interesting.
they were legends. They were legends. Like
Legends,
they embodied the role, heart and soul. Like for a lot of these guys, they came on like season 1 or season 2, and that was their job, their full-time job. They worked almost every single day on the set of Vikings. They became this little family, you know, and they grew their hair, they grew their beards. They when we wrapped, they all bought like team jackets. They got Vikings emblems on them, and they got like the names on them and all that kind of stuff. And they were just like, they just made the show because there was so many like interesting people who had like crazy beard or crazy hair, or, you know, and they'd be like, yeah, he's great, get him in here, like he actually looks like a Viking, you know. And then they gave it socks. Like they'd have to run up and down. They're doing charges. They're sitting in the rain. Like they sat through so much hard environments for the show, and they loved every second of it. You never heard them complaining around. You know, they might go like, when are you getting fed? Because I'm starving, you know. But that was kind of it. But they were really great. Like,
no, that's cool, man. That is cool. And yeah, to be going through those kind of hard battle shoots in the elements. An island, by the way, can be a little bit on the chilly side, because I'll tell you what, into the battle, that quarry in February in Ireland was, that was, yeah.
And the thing is, like, for some of the extras who weren't as seasoned, they're coming on to this show. I used to work as an extra, so I know exactly what it's like. They just tell you like, oh, bring this, bring that, you know, and you'll be fine. And you rock up, and everyone's wearing like Berghaus and Helly Hansen, and they're zipped up. You know, you can't see them, and they've got all the technology that allows people, like humans, do what they do, and all the wilderness, whatever. And you're there with this like anorak that you bought in Primark, you know, and you're like, I think I might be ill prepared for this. And then you've got 12 hours sitting in the lashing rain, or you're sitting on a boat and it's windy and rain, and you've got no kit. You're like, what am I doing?
Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, the joys.
Yeah.
But like I said, I mean, I like that, you know, like in terms of the not complaining, in terms of like remembering where you are and keeping things in perspective. And yeah, it's like you know, I've worked the A to Z of shite jobs, you know, getting where I am. So before I've sort of stabilised myself out, I've worked in supermarkets and warehouses, and even a petrol station. And I'd rather be like hit full blown in the face with probably anything, you know. I mean, like shots at point blank range daily, dropped off cliffs every single day. Without parts, I'll do it Hong Kong style rather than go back to working in a fucking petrol station. I'm very grateful of that experience, as I know you are. And it's cool though when you got, like you say, you got a team of extras. You know, that is just purely for the love of it. That's really, really good to see. It's really, really refreshing to see. What was I going to say now? So there's your career: Black Widow, Stranger Things, Vikings, and obviously Penny Dreadful and Into the Badlands, as we've mentioned. Okay, so we've got loads of different things to cover. So Into the Badlands, predominantly a sort of martial arts series, and you've got a deep background in martial arts. So tell us a little bit about your background and how it came to be, man.
I started martial arts when I was 13 or 14. Always had a really, really great interest, but also cripplingly shy. So my cousin did karate, and he compete, and he asked me to come to a class, and I sat in the back of the class, and then said, "There's no way I'm doing this." I was just too shy. And then a couple of years later, hanging out, as young people do, I had an incident with a couple of fellas, and which sent me running for the hills. And I just thought to myself, I'm never going to let that happen ever again. What just happened there is not okay. That's possible, and there's nothing I could do about it. So I'm going to change that. Started kickboxing, and up until that point, I was terrible at all sports, like terrible. The only way I could play football was kick the ball really hard and then run, because I was faster than most people. So I used to just kick the ball as hard as I could and then sprint, and then kick the ball and then sprint. But I could never score a goal. Couldn't pass. I couldn't do anything. But when I found kickboxing, I was like, yes, this is it. So it was just like a natural thing for me. As soon as I started, I picked it up really easy. I really enjoyed it. I learned really quick, and it was just the environment for me. And I've never looked back since. I've been doing kickboxing for nearly 20 years now, and I've done taekwondo, Thai boxing, done some jiu-jitsu, done a little bit of silat, done some boxing. I just love it all.
Oh, it's amazing, man. That sounds a very, very sort of similar path to myself, to be fair. Very much the same. Not a sportsman at all. And to be honest, mate, with a couple of exceptions, I really wasn't interested in most of the sport and stuff I was getting.
Same.
At school, I couldn't give a damn. But the martial arts I started at the age of 8, and again, very much as a way of dealing with the shit in life. And I needed some agency. I needed some way to fight back. It's more about not feeling lost in those situations. Or there is nothing worse than being involved in a violent situation, an aggressive situation, and just not having a game plan, not knowing, how to handle that situation.
Yeah.
I mean, these days I've taken that much, much further. I teach self-protection courses because a huge, huge amount of real fighting, whether you're talking about competitive stuff or, but especially if you're talking about real life violence, is it's the psychological elements, it's adrenal control, etc., etc., etc. Obviously, your elements of being out of control, your adrenaline just go through your life full stop, because anytime you're going to push yourself to do anything, you're going to get that inner, what's going on here then? And the adrenaline will kick in to whatever degree it does. And being able to sort of push through that, understand what's happening in yourself, understand it's a normal physical reaction, and it's not like, there's, a lot of people, they're just so disconnected from that experience of adrenaline, that when the adrenaline hits, they think that there's something physically wrong with them, which then increases the anxiety, which then increases the adrenaline, and it's a vicious circle, and you go down and down and down. And I think martial arts is a spectacular way of dealing with that, and obviously has a much broader application throughout your life. I mean, I literally, the blogs that I'm doing on this channel, that is essentially what it is. It's how I built effective internal systems from my training in the martial arts. And obviously I've got a deep background in traditional martial art, as well as, boxing, kickboxing, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and things like that. And obviously the trad arts, I've had phenomenal teachers in all of it that have really sort of, I don't think it's even an exaggeration to say help keep me alive at times, not just with the physical skills they've shown me, but also bringing in the philosophy and the mindset, and really giving me those building blocks to help me, build my own structure and cope with life. And that's not that is how important it is to me. That's how vital it's been to me. So, have you had any particular sort of coaches or instructors or anybody that you that have been particularly influential? I know all of them, but I mean, tell us a little bit about who you've trained with and things like that.
So my kickboxing coach, obviously, he's a good friend of mine now. He started out as a teacher, initially, and now he's a really, really good friend of mine, and I still train with him, nearly 20 years later.
What's he called?
His name's Liam Whelan, and he has a club called Total Kickboxing. And he's the same. He's been doing martial arts for years. He's got photographs of him when when he was young and doing bodybuilding, and he's in different clubs and at different competitions, all that kind of stuff. He was really massively influential and also really, really helpful in terms of the weird politics in martial arts. Sometimes coaches get a little bit weird when you go and you want to branch out and train somewhere else. They're like, who are you training with? Where are you going? What's going on? He was like, yeah, cool, go and bring it back. And like, what did you learn? And, that kind of stuff. So I not left kickboxing, but then I also started Taekwondo. And my coach in Taekwondo actually introduced me to another system called the Spear system, which is actually going to touch back off on what we were just talking about. But my coach there in Taekwondo that I trained with him for years, I actually met him in school. In fourth year in Ireland, they do a transition year, so it's like a gap from like the real academic stuff to there's a gap that in like the fourth year of your high school years or whatever. So you kind of like do some work experience and you do a play, and it just takes the push off, and then you go back into like the real study for your final year exams in the last 2 years. So I met him, and they did a self-defense program in the school. That's where I met my Taekwondo instructor, and then I started doing Taekwondo, and he introduced me this thing called the Spear system. And the Spear system is, to quote what it is the study of human movement as it relates to violence, fear, and aggression. So it's all about the psychology of a violent encounter and the human weapon system. Like what does the body want to do prior to any training? So if you've never done any martial arts, what does your body want to do? Because martial arts is a relatively new thing. Like humans are thousands of years old. But like we didn't fight once we made up martial arts. We were fighting and then made the martial arts because we're like, how can I get better at this? So it's like, okay, well, what does the body want to do? What do human beings want to do before they've had any training? And is there anything that we can tap into to add that to our combative arsenal? And I've been doing that for 10 or 11 years now. I work with the company called Boyle Tactical Systems. And they teach all over the world. They teach personal protection to everybody. Soccer moms. Even though that we're trying to find a better term for that, but it is the best term for soccer mom. Everybody knows what you mean. But from people who are just everyday people, your average Jolene, and then up to law enforcement and military. So that's actually been a great experience, and I've learned an awful lot from that as well. Like you said, man, the things that I've learned from my coaches and from martial arts, both in personal protection, like for me to be able to look after myself or my loved ones, but then to learn how to deal with life, to learn how to dig in and grit your teeth and be like, you know what, it's going to be all right. I've been through hard times before, and just relating that mentality of what it gives you in terms of like discipline and resilience and stuff like that in the arts. And now all those three coaches who I came to as a student looking for information are now some of my best friends. There's my kickboxing coach, Liam Whelan. There's my Taekwondo coach, Dara Bolton, and he introduced me to Tony Blower, who I now work for Boyle Tactical Systems. And my life would be totally different. That's why I'm a stunt performer. That's why I am where I am, because I started martial arts. If I had never started, I probably wouldn't be where I am now.
You were talking about how combat evolved, and you were effectively, I think, what you were referring to with gross motor skills. Yeah. Basic sort of facets of human physical ability in combat situations, right? And you do need to focus on those for real life self-protection. Most people, if you're not particularly good at sort of coping with adrenaline and the like, that's all they'll have. Even a trained, a trained exponent, somebody that is great at handling adrenaline and everything else like that, you will reach a point of adrenal overload and exhaustion where, again, pretty much all you're going to get left is your gross motor skills.
There's about gross motor skills and even professional fighters. My friend and coach, Tony Blair, does a podcast called the No Fear podcast. And he interviews different people from all walks of life, martial artists, MMA fighters, psychologists, you name it. He brings people on. He talks about fear and how to manage it and what to do and how to deal with it in all different kind of walks of life. But there's a UFC fighter called Anthony Stevens.
Yeah.
And you hear about his, someone broke into his house?
No.
Right. Like, check this out, man. Joe Rogan was talking about it, and then Tony Blair actually got him on the podcast to discuss what had happened. So on Joe Rogan's podcast, they said amongst themselves as they were having a conversation, they were like, Anthony Stevens is absolutely one of the most dangerous people on, like he's top 100 most dangerous fighters in the world, easily, if not, closer to the number one, like, in the first 20, say. He is a dangerous, violent man, But the story, excuse me, when he talks to Tony on the podcast is like, it's 5 a.m. His wife wakes him up saying there's someone in the house. He lives in America, so guns are a thing. So he wakes up. He's like, oh my God, I have to get my family out of the house. And not only is the guy in the house, but the guy is just screaming. So he just hears this strange man in his house screaming at the top of his lungs. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know, has he got a gun? Has he got a knife? Is he on his own? He knows nothing about it, but he knows he has to go and deal with it and get his family out. So he tells his wife to get the kids, and massively, like, talk about courage, he just runs into the dark towards the noise of this strange man screaming. Like, he doesn't know, am I going to get shot? Am I going to get stabbed? Is there more people here? What's going to happen? He just runs towards the danger because he's got to protect his family, right? So he ends up finding the guy. They kind of crash into each other and they fall, and he's rolling around. And like, Anthony Stevens is a top contender in the UFC. So he's obviously dominating this guy. But psychologically, he's going, has he got a gun? Has he got a knife? Is he on his own? And he's trying to watch what's going on. The massive adrenaline dump, there's fear, there's all this psychological stuff going on. So as he's fighting him, he's getting tired. And he's trying to hold this guy, but as he's trying to hold him, he's like, I could do this, but if I go to my sport background here now, and if I try and like use both my hands to tie him up or do this or do that, he might pull his gun or pull his knife. So he's just trying to like hold his hands, and he's like nailing this guy, he's smashing him. And the guy that broke into the house is much smaller than Anthony Stevens is. And Anthony Stevens is like, I'm smashing this guy and he's not stopping. So after a while, he's getting tired. He's like, I'm going to burn out. Like, I'm going to fatigue to the point where I can't fight anymore, and this guy's going to win. And it's one of those, as we were talking about gross motor skills and people who are trained, you could be the best person in the world, but if you change the rules or change the comfort zone, everything changes. It's a really, really good interview. You should check it out, man. It's called
No, I definitely will. I couldn't agree more with that. I've had enough. I used to work as a bouncer on and off for 18 years. I've probably done about 10 years in that 18 stretch, like on for a year, off for a couple of years, on for a couple of years, blah, blah, blah. But I've had an awful lot of real life violent encounters. I can relate straight away to those adrenal states. It is very, very different from being in a controlled match fight environment, in a ring or a cage or whatever. There's obviously far more at stake when you are there protecting your loved ones, your family, etc., etc. In my training, I kind of like, I've learned to put things in boxes. So it's like, this stuff is for sport and or screen. This stuff is for real life, street, no holds barred. Okay, and I mean no holds barred, as in, basically in a street fight, the first thing I will do is what you cannot do in MMA or Vale Tudo. Let's say Vale Tudo with the head stamps and the headbutts and everything. Even there, you cannot hit the eyes. Yeah. Sometimes you're allowed to hit the throat, I think, which is bangers, but there you go. The throat or the groin, right? And you can't like rip at the mouth, fish up the mouth. So bottom line is, in Vale Tudo, you are allowed to strike the back of the head. In pro MMA, UFC, you can't. Anything you can't do, take the UFC because everyone's more familiar with it. Anything that you can't do in the UFC is probably your first go-to in a live situation. A lot of what I use in real life self-protection situations is a combination of boxing and Thai boxing and traditional karate kung fu. It is super close range striking because obviously there are different types of encounter and things. A match fight we've covered. It's pre-arranged. Now I have once or twice in real life had a square goal outside of a pub or whatever. It just doesn't really happen much. I mean, I'm quite like honoured that that's actually happened to me at least once in my life. I mean, I didn't think that really happened past like the 1950s, because just about, in seriousness, just about every real life encounter I've had has been multiple opponents and often with weapons, usually improvised weapons. On one occasion, a blade. So premeditated and serious.
Yeah.
So, and you know, like the blade, by the way, I didn't even realize the guy had it until we reviewed the CCTV footage afterwards with the police. And then I was like, you know, but this is the importance of having a system, of knowing where you are, of having your trigger points, of making decisions, because the fact that I was decisive in that process and I used a preemptive strike, you know, arguably saved my life, you know. Yeah. So, but again, like traditional martial arts fell out of vogue. And don't get me wrong, this is covered in one of my blogs, but there is a lot of crap out there. And it comes down to people's interpretation of the system. So any system that you've got, system of combat, okay, a good system has been developed by hands-on experience and, you know, through, you know, tried and tested experience, we start to realize common patterns or techniques that crop up on a regular basis, similar occurrences. And you go, so that bit's important and that bit's important. And then these similar patterns or experiences, we take those, we study those, we refine those, and they become the cornerstones of your system. Yeah. When people refer to like basic techniques, I think that's maybe the wrong word, because basic sort of makes it sound like beginner, you know.
Yeah.
I think fundamental techniques is a better word, you know. So this is what I love about boxing. 4 techniques in the entire system: jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Okay, multitude of variations to how you throw these and how you put these together. But there's no logjam. Yeah. Also, boxing is very much an applied art. You know, you get in the ring and you spar. You are learning to take a hit. You are, because the first time you get hit should not be in a live scenario, be that on the street or in a ring or a cage. You know.
Yeah.
You're learning to take a shot. Your body's recognizing it. You're learning distance. You're learning range. And obviously, these are things that change all the time in live scenarios very, very quickly. We want to come back and talk about street stuff. And this is honestly where traditional martial arts has a lot of advantages. Even when you're doing the very sort of rigid, regimented line work from a locked stance and a solid point, okay? And then you're exploding. You know, say you're doing basic line work in karate. That is, the body mechanics there are probably more reminiscent of an actual fight most of the time than, you know, your kickboxing or your boxing, because it's not a match fight. You're not at range. You're not warmed up. You've not got distance. And distance disappears in the blink of an eye. So you got kicking distance. Now I'm not blowing my own trumpet. Before, even now, with a hip as well on its way out, I'm still a very competent kicker, but like in my younger days, really good kicker. I'm not blowing my own trumpet, just very technically sound. And I'm 5'10", but there's plenty of footage of me kicking guys 6'6" and over in the head. Admittedly, I had to do it as a capoeira kick on one time because the guy was that tall, pretty much doing the splits, but I hit him, you know. So I have that kind of ability. In real life situations, I had something along the lines of, and I'm ballpark figuring here, say about 300 odd physical confrontations. Most of those were nothing. Most of those were, you know, me removing some drunk idiot from a club who got a bit leery, and I had to restrain him on the way out, and no harm, no foul. Of those 300, about 30 were what you would call fights, like real serious fights where I've had to inflict damage. Yeah. Of those 30, I've had kicking distance 3 times. That's 1% of the time. Right? Now, don't get me wrong. On those 3 occasions where I had kicking distance, done, destroyed. Yeah, it's better to have it and not need it. But you got. This is what I'm saying. Kicking is a huge part of my arsenal in a match fight scenario, but in a street scenario, it's a very, very different game, because you most of the time you do not get the range, and if you do get the range, it disappears in a heartbeat. A lot of what I end up using is, like I say, it's the extremely close range striking techniques of Kung Fu and traditional karate. And it is things like eye gouges, it is throat strikes, it is
Anything squishy.
anything squishy. But also the mechanics are totally different because it's being able to relax and explode from a dead stop inside of, say, 18 inches, 2 feet of distance. So that is a completely different set of muscle memory to learn. Now, I have that in spades, as well as the competitive stuff. And over time, you learn to put things in boxes. You know, that's a huge aspect of it. You know what I mean? But coming back to the systems, it's like any system that is based on experiential knowledge, and then, you know, the common occurrences have been identified and drilled and refined to form the fundamental cornerstones of that system. That's a good system, yeah? Problem with systems, and specifically with the traditional martial arts, is so stylized, and it was stylized deliberately. It was stylized to disguise what they were doing. If you take the katas or the forms, they were stylized partly to disguise it, but also partly because certain movements are not actually, you know, like if you're doing a single arm throw in a kata, you can't do that without a person there. So you get like this kind of movement instead, you know, and it's representative usually of like an Iponti Nagi type single arm throw, very, very practical technique.
Yeah.
Or you can't practice it without someone. And it was more like a mental rehearsal. But then you get all the deterioration of it as it gets passed down through the years. It gets deliberately bastardized in some places, you know, and you get some very, very interesting interpretations of what we're doing. You go off into fantasy land, and this is the thing: you've got too many people, especially in the traditional arts, who haven't got a clue. And I mean, the traditional martial arts I've done, all very tried and tested stuff by myself, as much as my instructors, you know. But like, of my instructors, one of them was a reformed football hooligan who'd seen a lot of real life violence. He then went on to really take the dark path, and he became an insurance salesman for a living and did very well in that field. But, you know, where did it all go wrong? But he was a very, very good martial artist that had obviously had a hell of a lot of scraps on the terraces in the 70s and had a massive knowledge of real life violence. So I was always taught trad karate from that very real background. So we did the kata and the form, and I got a love for the art form early on, and that was combined with the artistry in the Hong Kong movies, because Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee in particular, but Donnie Yen, Jet Li, Yun Bu, Sammo Hung, all the golden age of Golden Harvest, Cynthia Rothrock and Michelle Yeoh, and oh man, just all those old films. I loved the artistry. I loved the physical expression. But I also, it's like martial arts was like the bridge for me between the two different worlds. It's like the worst elements of our existence, physical violence. It's how to deal with that. It gives me some agency. And then there was the art side, which was the creativity, the positivity, the stuff that's then in time led to me doing the stuff on screen myself and being a part of telling those stories that have that worldwide influence. And I'm always blown away by that aspect of things.